In late August, around 500 Chinese troops tried to cross into Indian territory by the province of Ladakh. Hand-to-hand combat ensued, lasting up to 3 hours. Not only did the incursion fail, but India hit back, and its special forces captured a Chinese outpost in the surrounding hills. Still earlier, Chinese troops had covertly moved into Nepal's northern territories, likely with the blessing of the Nepali government. These two recent incidents follow a massive skirmish that occurred 3 months earlier when the Chinese army annexed 60 square kilometers of Indian territory. So what's all this about? Why fight over an inhospitable land? I'm your host Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. Today's episode is brought to you by Raycon, which offers a line of wireless audio devices that are used by celebrities like Mike Tyson, Snoop Dogg, and J.R. Smith. It's available on buyraycon.com/Caspian. I've been using the Everyday E25 for the last couple of months, and they're great for working from home. Performance-wise, I've only had to charge them once every 3 days, and the Bluetooth pairing is very smooth, while the design gives a noise-isolating fit. Raycons retain that high quality while being half the price of other premium earbuds. If you're in the market for wireless earbuds, go to buyraycon.com/Caspian to get 15% off your order. Click the link in the description box below. Borders are useful, but they don't always work. Enclosed seas cannot always be split equidistantly. Some rivers change directions, jungles are often uncharted, and places of high altitude lack logistics and oversight. The Himalayas is one such place that has been a near constant source of friction between China and India precisely because it is uncontrollable. That fact, however, hasn't deterred the two from trying, or at least prevent the other from dominating the battle space. The Himalayas hold strategic value, but for the most inconspicuous reasons. Technically speaking, China and India are neighbors, but in a certain sense, they don't really share a border. With over 50 mountains exceeding 7 kilometers in elevation and a length of 2,400 kilometers from west to east, the Himalayas separate the Asian juggernauts as much as an ocean would. Traversing the arc of mountains is difficult, with roads being sparsely constructed and in poor condition. That explains why India and China prefer to trade with each other by sea. However, the tragedy of great power politics is all about the uncertainty of intentions. When one does not know what the opponent will do, one must assume the opponent will do the worst. As a result, great powers must prepare for the worst. It is an unfortunate cycle that encourages suspicion and hostility, much like in a game of chess. India and China have been playing this particular game in the Himalayas for over 7 decades. In their territorial counterclaims, officials from New Delhi and Beijing accuse each other of encroaching on their rightful territories. Much of the dispute stems from the colonial era, when British cartographers tried to draw maps of the region and sought to define the boundary between British India and the Qing Empire. However, the Himalayan terrain proved difficult to survey, and the maps that were produced were inaccurate. The irony is that neither the British, the Chinese, nor the nations in the Indian subcontinent were physically present at the territorialized high-altitude regions. So much of the map drawing was merely academic. It didn't have real consequences because there was no way to overcome the geographic elements. The technology did not exist back then. As such, cartographical claims on the area and its many flaws were disregarded. Only in the mid-20th century, when China, India, and Pakistan pressed claims they inherited from their predecessors, did the delineation of high altitudes become a matter of national security. Beijing and New Delhi spent the next few decades trying to enforce their claims, sometimes with violence and sometimes with science. However, even with modern technology, delineation remains difficult. Borders marked by ice or rivers tend to change with the seasons. and so it's somewhat of an impossible task to draw lasting boundaries. The only thing Indian and Chinese policymakers can do is militarize the area as to deny the opponent of gaining the physical upper hand. That's what India and China have been doing for over 7 decades. During this time, thousands of soldiers have died, while the environment has been badly damaged by increased human activity. In mid-June, however, tensions reached a breaking point when fighting between Chinese and Indian soldiers left more than a dozen Indian soldiers dead, another dozen seriously injured, and an unknown number of Chinese casualties. The fight produced the first fatalities along the high-altitude border since 1975. The way it played out was disturbing. There were no shots fired or bombs detonated. It was a massive fight with fists and clubs, and most soldiers died by falling off a cliff or into a river. What's more is that the extreme terrain impeded rescue efforts, which left the wounded exposed to sub-zero temperatures, resulting in even more casualties. It would be an understatement to say that high-altitude combat is unyielding. Weather patterns can be unpredictable, extreme temperatures are demoralizing, and the few roads that exist are unreliable. Sending large columns of military forces into the area or across the Himalayas is nearly impossible. Although one can construct expensive highways and tunnels, the geographic passages are generally not wide enough to permit the movement of enough supplies to sustain a large military presence, especially not in times of conflict. Even aerial operations are impeded. The Himalayan mountains are so steep that communications inevitably break down, rendering resupply helicopters useless. Large-scale mobilization is thus a logistical nightmare. In 1962, China and India fought briefly in Tibet, but the hostilities could not be sustained for longer than a month because of the lack of logistics. The absence of major infrastructure is consequently an equalizer for India and China. Since neither side can bring substantial firepower to the front line, the lack of roads, bridges, and tunnels is a source of de-escalation. This is key to understanding the Himalayas because most standoffs are triggered when one side tries to construct new roads or tunnels. The skirmish in June, for instance, started when India attempted to build a road in the Galvan River Valley. China could either stand by and watch the status quo change, or it could react with violence and voice its opposition. It chose to do the latter. So why then did so many soldiers need to perish in an inhospitable land? The Himalayan mountains host no human settlements, there are no trade corridors nearby, and even the lowlands are not arable. There is, however, strategic value in this seemingly inhospitable land. North of the Himalayas lies Tibet. It is a vast plateau that is rich in fresh water and the source of many transnational rivers. Nearly half of the world's population depends on the Tibetan rivers, but the indigenous population is non-Chinese. When China retook the area in the 1950s, Tibet's leader, the Dalai Lama, fled to India, where he was welcomed. To this day, the Dalai Lama continues to symbolize Tibetan independence while being a source of anxiety for Chinese lawmakers. Although Tibet lies on the other side of the Himalayas from India, if it were to become independent, Tibet would most likely ally with India. This would then permit Indian forces to be based there, and in time India would build up a logistical system that would allow it to pressure the heartland of China. It is a scenario that seems far-fetched today, but crazier things have happened in history. Either way, China is not taking any chances and sees Tibet, having a hostile foreign patron, as a threat to China. This then explains Beijing's obsession with keeping Tibet as a buffer zone against India. Slightly to the south of the Himalayas are two more countries, Nepal and Bhutan. Both nations are located on plateaus, and if China were ever to gain control in either or extend its presence, it could then assemble a large military force and the logistics to threaten India. Nepal is of particular interest because it is politically unstable and has a Maoist movement that sympathizes with the Beijing government. India is trying to coerce Nepal into its fold, but that policy has backfired as Nepalese lawmakers resent New Delhi's intrusion in their affairs. So, to sum things up, a political revolution in either Tibet, Nepal, or Bhutan could change the equation between India and China. While Tibet can be weaponized against China, Nepal and Bhutan can be turned against India, and both the Indians and the Chinese have been poking at these regions for decades. To the east, by an area known as Doklam, is another point of friction. The Doklam Plateau overlooks a strategic valley that is home to the Siliguri Corridor, which is a narrow stretch of land of about 22 kilometers that connects India's northeastern provinces to the rest of the country. If China were to establish military facilities on the Himalayan heights, every Indian move would be detected beforehand. India would lose the element of surprise, and its rapid forces would be incapacitated. Thus, whoever controls Doklam will have the ability to either defend or attack the Siliguri corridor, which could then either ensure or destroy the territorial integrity of northeastern India. Understandably, policymakers from New Delhi do not tolerate any foreign or nearby action that would weaken their hold. Beyond the mountains and corridors, the Himalayan battle space offers one more strategic value: distraction. Each time China provokes an incident at the Himalayas, India shifts its resources from the ocean to the mountains. In theory, India should have been a maritime powerhouse in the Indian Ocean. The country sits by the world's busiest sea lane, it hosts dozens of deep-water ports, it does most of its trade by the sea, and it inherited naval expertise from the British. An Indian blue water navy could badly hurt the interests of China, especially since much of the Chinese trade flows right by the Indian subcontinent. For instance, an Indian port by the Andaman or Nicobar Islands could shut down the mouth of the Malacca Strait and choke the Chinese economy. Yet, strangely, none of this has happened. Quite the opposite, it is China which is expanding its blue water navy and developing a network of ports along the Indian Ocean. The trouble is that each time there is an incident at either the Pakistani or Chinese border, India has had to constantly shift resources between its army, air force, and navy. The result is that India's blue water navy hasn't been getting the attention it needs. The naval budget has dropped from 18% in 2012 to just 15% of the current military budget. So each time Beijing extends economic or military aid to Pakistan or produces a skirmish at the Himalayas, it seeks to keep New Delhi focused on land-based capabilities. In turn, this allows the Chinese to freely develop their string of pearls in the Indian Ocean. All things being equal, the Himalayas is a place where India and China signal their disapproval to each other. It is a place where one can earn political points by arousing nationalist sentiment. It is a place where influential military leaders can remain preoccupied with matters other than politics. The good news is that the Himalayan terrain is so remote and isolated that a fight between the two nuclear powers cannot be sustained. The logistics are non-existent, and neither side will permit the other to construct the necessary infrastructure. So there is no room for escalation other than fast-paced in-and-out incursions. And as long as such facilities are not built, we can take comfort in the fact that major hostilities are unlikely to materialize in the near future. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and Sahol.